among us doesn't have a brother or a sister, a husband or a wife, a son or a daughter, mother or father, a colleague at work, a fellow volunteer or on a committee or a sports team, about whom we haven't said or at least thought, how come I always get stuck doing all the work while so-and-so is taking it easy? I can tell by your smiles you can think of someone right away in your own experience. Sure enough, in many cases, so-and-so is taking it easy while you and maybe a few others are doing all the work. But today's gospel is not about fair and unfair division of labor. It's not about who's going to be named Employee of the Month. It's not about justice in the workplace. It's not about the tension between contemplation and activity. Today's gospel isn't even so much about Martha and Mary as it is about Jesus and how we come to know him, to love him, and to serve him. Let's turn the familiar story we just heard, let's turn it around and see what we might learn. Imagine for a moment that in the story in the gospel today, it's Martha keeping busy about her cooking and cleaning, and Mary who turns to Jesus and says, Lord, I really want to apologize for all the noise Martha's making in the kitchen. I'm so embarrassed that she thinks she's so busy that she can't come out here and visit with you for a while. I think maybe you ought to say something to her. At which point, I think Jesus would have turned to Mary and said, Lady, what is your problem? Martha's working hard out there to prepare a nice meal for us. She's doing what you and I are talking about. She's serving other people out of love for God. Besides which, I'm hungry and I can't wait to eat. As is so often the case, there are two sides to the story, just one coin. We often approach this gospel asking, am I more like Martha or more like Mary? As if we ought to choose between the two of them. Let's look at the first reading today, the story of Abraham and Sarah and their three visitors. It's all about warm hospitality and serving the visitor. And this is radical hospitality. Abraham's sitting in the shade of his tent on a hot day, and he sees three complete strangers walking by. He jumps up, runs out to them, invites them to join him and Sarah, tells Sarah to prepare a meal for them. Abraham doesn't do this because he's an extrovert, because he likes to throw parties. He's doing it because that kind of hospitality was, in his time and culture, a sacred responsibility. People were expected to do this. Strangers were expected to be welcomed in by people they didn't know. It was not only a responsibility, it was also seen as an opportunity to serve God. As the people in Israel used to say, welcome the stranger, because those who have welcomed strangers have entertained angels. Can you imagine this afternoon sitting in your yard, in your lawn chair, getting some sun, and you notice three folks walking down the street in front of your house, and you have no idea who they are, but you jump up, run out to the street, say hello to them, invite them into your backyard, say, come on in, we got drinks and snacks, and then you call your wife and you say, get the grill going because I'm going to make some steak and chicken for our friends here. See how strange that sounds to us? We'd probably be afraid to do that, huh? There's a difference between the world and the scriptures here and our world. But the call to radical hospitality has not changed. In the gospel, In response to Martha's complaint, Jesus tells her there is need of only one thing. Then he points to her sister Mary's prayerful attentiveness. Is that the one thing that you and I need? To be more attentive to the Lord in prayer? Are we anxious and worried, too busy about many other things? While the one thing we really need is to make time to just get away from it all and sit down with Jesus and talk with him, listening to him, just like Mary did? Or is the one thing you and I need a good kick in the butt to move us out of our contentment to serving others? From contemplation to action. From self-convenience to sacrifice for our neighbor. This story here doesn't give us many details. It doesn't tell us what happened right after Jesus spoke to Martha. It ends right where the story ends, as I read it to you this morning. But after telling Martha that Mary had chosen the better part, can't you easily imagine Jesus getting up and following Martha back into the kitchen and asking her if she needs a hand helping with the dinner? Isn't that what Jesus would do? Isn't that just what Jesus would do? Whether you and I are praying or working, praying or serving, the Lord is with us. If we get lost in our work and our worries, we might need to make more time for prayer. And if our prayer isn't leading us to serve others, then we might need to look at our prayer, at its nature and its quality, and ask, why isn't it urging us, prodding us, nudging us to do what the Lord asks of us? Our prayer is meant to nourish and strengthen us for doing the Lord's work. And it's in serving one another, that we meet Jesus, who often comes to us disguised as a stranger, a visitor, waiting to be welcomed into our lives, our hearts, and our homes. To bring it all up to date, if you and I fail to use these scriptures as a baseline for how we parse and debate the terms and conditions of welcoming strangers into our lives in 2022, strangers waiting at our borders and little strangers waiting to be born, if scriptures like these don't inform our decisions, then we are failing to sit with Mary at the Lord's feet to listen to his word. This story doesn't have the answer to every one of today's problems, but this story ought to be a baseline, a beginning point for us to consider what kind of hospitality is the Lord inviting us to in our lives today. Like Mary, all of us here this morning have just spent time listening to Jesus speak to us in the scriptures. And now Jesus invites us to his table where, like Martha, he prepares a meal for us, a feast of grace, the food of his life laid down for us on the altar of the cross, now shared with us the altar of his table in the bread and the cup of the Eucharist. Feeding others with his life, that is radical hospitality. Pray with me that what we do here together this morning will lead us to spend time every day sitting quietly with the Lord in prayer. And pray that what we share at this altar will give us an appetite for serving one another as Christ has served us.